Good evening, everyone. We're just going to give people a couple minutes to come in and get settled in, and we'll get started in just a minute or two. For those of you just joining, welcome. We are going to take about another minute, let people enter the webinar, and we will go ahead and get started. All right, we are going to go ahead and get started for this evening. So good evening and welcome to the In the Adirondack Library series. I am Liz Bellier. I'm the Public Programs Manager here at the Adirondack Experience, the museum on Blue Mountain Lake. The Adirondack Experience Library is the largest and most comprehensive repository of books, manuscripts, maps, and government documents related to the history of the Adirondack region. And through this series, we are excited to bring you inside the library to explore Adirondack life, history, and culture. Now, typically on this series, we're talking about books, but libraries are not just home for books. They also contain vast collections of maps, including the library here at the Adirondack Experience. And maps, they preserve a visual record of how landscapes, communities, and ecosystems have changed over time. The maps created today will be the historical references for the future, helping researchers, historians, outdoor enthusiasts, and many others understand how places have evolved. Whether for navigation, conservation, or storytelling, maps serve as powerful tools that bridge the past, present, and future. We will certainly hear more about maps in just a few moments. But first, I'd like to introduce our interviewer for tonight and throughout this series, Mitch Teich. Mitch is the station manager at North Country Public Radio and the host of North Words. North Words airs on the fourth Friday of each month from 12 to 1 p.m. on NCPR. Each episode features interviews, on-site recordings, and special features that remind us what makes the North Country such a special and unique place to be. You can find more information at ncpr.org. And it is my pleasure to introduce tonight's speaker, Ezra Schwartzberg. Ezra is a map maker based in the Adirondacks, where he and his team create a wide variety of maps, ranging from recreation and conservation maps within the Adirondack Park to projects that span across the country. His journey into cartography began with scientific research. Ezra originally founded the Adirondack Research as a field research company focused on environmental studies and invasive species. Over time, his work naturally expanded into mapping, leading him to build a business that now employs cartographers, graphic designers, and a dedicated research team. In tonight's talk, Building Accessibility with Maps, Ezra will explore how thoughtful cartography can improve accessibility, helping people of all abilities navigate and engage with outdoor spaces. He'll share insights into how maps can be designed to enhance inclusivity and create better, more accessible spaces for everyone. And in just a moment, I'll turn it over to Ezra. He'll share a bit about his work. Mitch will join in for conversation, and then we will wrap up this evening with some audience questions. And on that note, we welcome your participation. You can submit your questions through the Q&A feature, and be sure to check the chat for important links. And with that, I will turn it over to Ezra.
Thanks, Liz. It's really special to be here. One of the first maps that we made was of Upper and Lower Saranac Lake, and actually came down to the museum and looked through the maps in the archive to get the to double check the names of the bays and the islands and find wells around the lake and stuff like that. So it's really neat to be here virtually. Um, I'll be able to do a screen share of a presentation and show you lots of maps that we've made. But first, I'm kind of curious to hear in the question and answer where you all are listening in from. So if you could just type in maybe just the town that you're in, where you're viewing from, and we can see that in the Q&A.
And I'm not sure
Yep.
I don't know if the audience can see the Q&A as it goes in, but I can read some as they come in. Waterford, New York, Allenwood, New Jersey, Greenfield Center, Saranac Lake, Henrietta, Pittsburgh, Queens, Northampton, the place I can never pronounce. So what is it? Honoi Falls, Honeoy Falls, Boonville, Long Lake, Newcomb, New York City, and also Schroon Lake, Syracuse, Stowe, Massachusetts, Corning, New York, originally from Long Lake, now in Seattle, Sabale, which I may also be mispronouncing, Lake George, Allentown, Alliance, Ohio, Granby, Connecticut, Lake Luzerne, Queensbury, Lambertville, New Jersey, Sackett's Harbor, Lake Placid, Mayfield, New York, Essex Junction, Vermont, Syracuse, Saratoga Springs, Saranac, Denver, Colorado, but originally from Vermont, Maryland, Woodstock, New York, Binghamton, and also Wilmington, New York, Rexford, New York, Danville, California. We have one international viewer from Bolton, Ontario, Silver Bay, Glens Falls.
On and
Someone's,
on.
uh, yeah, West Hartford, Blue Mountain Lake, and currently in North Richland Hills, Texas, all over the place.
No, that's great. Well, thanks for tuning in. So I'll go ahead and do a screen share right now, and you should be able to see the presentation. So the presentation that I'm going to give is titled "Building Accessibility with Maps: Bridging Science, Recreation, and Accessibility." My background, as Liz mentioned, is as a researcher. So I started this business doing environmental research, and what we found is that with the research that we were doing, the products that we were producing, so the end game of all of the research that we were doing was in the form of maps. So we just started making maps for the invasive species research that we're doing, forestry research. And what we found is that our audience, our research audience, really appreciated having good, clear maps. And that got us to get better and better at mapping. And then from that, we expanded into Green Goat Maps and decided to try to make some recreational maps. And those are the first maps that we made are the maps that you see in some of the stores in the Adirondack. So the Green Goat Map branded maps. I'm curious to hear in the Q&A if anybody has come across our Green Goat Maps in stores. And what would be really interesting for me to know is if you have seen any of our kiosk maps. So some of the maps that we have at trailheads of nature preserves. So maybe in the chat you could admit you don't have to read them off, but if you've seen our waterproof maps, just type in folded maps in the Q&A. And if you've seen any of our kiosk maps, just type in kiosk and make me really happy to see if any of you have recognized any of our kiosks. And I'll share a bunch, so you might be able to recognize some that you've seen in other places that you aren't aware that we made. But first, this cover slide is purposely covering up a map. And I'm wondering if anybody knows what the map is of. So I don't have a prize, but the first person to answer it with the name of the place that's being mapped here will get a call out from Mitch, we'll say. And I'll bring it up in just a second.
We have one person that points out we might be seeing the presenter view of your presentation.
All right. Let me see if I can. It's going to give it away then.
Someone has guessed the oxbow of the Racket River. Here's
There,
Todd Earl, who suggests the Wild Center.
bingo, you got it. So yeah, this is a brand new map of the Wild Center. We did this just a couple of months ago, and this was a really neat map for us. We're really proud of it. The Wild Center approached us, and they wanted a map, but they wanted it to be accessible to people that don't have a lot of experience hiking. So they didn't want a map with topo lines and typical cartography. They wanted something that had a lot more visual appeal. A lot of people will ask us for illustrated maps. So this was our attempt at making an illustrated map that was informative, but also easy for people to understand. So we did things like sketch out the parking lots and put the lines, the white lines on the parking lots. You can even see where the bus parking is by the longer lines. We have illustrated trees, because that's what people can really understand. But we also have hill shading under it. So if you look around the map, you can see where the terrain gets steeper based on where the shadows are coming. One thing that's neat about the trail system at the Wild Center is they have a ton of all-person trails. So those are all the yellow trails. So we wanted to differentiate between the trails that were all-person trails and the ones that were a little bit steeper. So the gray ones to the right, and especially the ones with the steep grade markings, those are ones that are not all-person trails. Anyway, this is a really good map, and it was fun to make. So why accessibility? Why are we focusing on accessibility, and why do we care about it? It's interesting. Over 61 million Americans have a disability, and that's roughly 26% of the population. So some form of disability can be, physical disabilities, sensory or cognitive disabilities. And making outdoor spaces accessible ensures that this large part of the population can enjoy natural and recreational spaces. So it's a huge percentage of the US population. It's really important that they can enjoy the outdoor environment. Another interesting fact that I came across is that the number of accessible trails is growing by about 5% annually. And these includes trails with accessibility features like smoother terrain, smoother surfaces, signage that documents accessibility and explains where accessible trails are, and things like ramps. These are increasing by 5% annually, so it's really taking off in the US, which is great. The other point I want to make is accessibility is for everyone. We have spent a lot of time knowing our audience. So we're a business, we work for people, but what we found is that we're really working for people who are working for other people. So an example of that is lake associations. We get hired by lake associations to do aquatic invasive species research and make maps for them. But the people that hire us are, the president of the lake association. They're not really hiring us to provide information for them. They're hiring us to provide information in the form of maps that they can show to other lake association members to try to get their buy-in for managing invasive species. So in order to do that, they need good, clear maps. Our land trust clients are very similar. We're providing maps for the land trusts, like the one that you can see on the bottom right here, but it's not for them, it's for their clientele, it's for their stakeholders. So they need their preserves to be accessible so that as many people in the general public can enjoy those private but conserved spaces as possible.
Can I jump in with a question real quick?
Sure.
Do clients like that understand what they're looking for when they approach you, or do you work with them to help them grasp what accessibility might mean to them?
It's totally both. A lot of people have specific needs that they really want us to try to encapsulate for them. But we have a lot of experience too, so we bring a lot to the table. But it's definitely a back and forth, and every place is different, and every group's needs are different. So another audience that I think is neat that needs accessibility are our government clients. So we have, we do research, we do work for the federal government and for the state government. The New York State DEC, they hire us to do research. they don't, they're just looking for data. They're trying to make decisions. They don't ask us for accessible maps or easy to read maps, but we provide them anyway. And when we give them a map like this to explain where invasive species are on different stretches of the river, while they're not looking for it and they're not asking for it, when we give them something like this, they can show it to their bosses, their stakeholders, their decision makers. So when they're trying to get together as a group, they've limited time, they want to decide where to focus their energies. A map like this is clear and useful for them. And the next thing I want to talk about is, I explained why it's important, but I want to talk about why we think it's important. So us at Green Goat Maps and Adirondack Research. At Green Goat Maps, one of the main reasons is our customers like it. We currently have 19 titles of our Green Goat Maps, and they're all designed to be accessible to hikers. So the map that I'm showing on this slide is our Lake George map, which is one of my favorites. And it's just a beautiful map. It clearly shows where the state land is. It clearly shows where the trails are. Has a ton of information in there, including where properties that are owned and preserved by the Lake George Land Conservancy are. So we're able to give a lot of really good information, but still make it easy for people to understand, make it easy for them to kind of plan their hikes and get out and enjoy nature. New clients are requesting accessibility. So I explained the Wild Center and what they were looking for in an illustrated map, and I showed you that map. But almost all of our clients, they approach us, they ask for either maps that are accessible or information on their kiosk that is accessible to their clientele, or for the example, Cobble Hill, which is a property that is under conservation easement, owned by Northwood School, and the easement is held by the Adirondack Land Trust. They recently did a bunch of infrastructure upgrades, including building a boardwalk for accessibility, and they wanted to show it off and they want to explain it. So they hired us to make a kiosk and map where we really highlight that boardwalk so that they can show it to people. Last thing is funding is starting to require accessibility. So we did a kiosk for the U.S. Forest Service, and they required that we met national accessibility standards for that project. And we have a current project with the Nature Conservancy where they received grant funding to redo kiosks, and we're redoing 14 kiosks in 14 of their preserves. And as a requirement of that, we're meeting national accessibility standards when making all of those kiosks. And accessibility isn't just important for these preserves and the people that are hiring us to do the work, they're important for everybody. So accessibility is important for you, everybody who's listening here, because some of you have physical limitations. Some of you have limitations in your knowledge of the outdoors or your experience in the outdoors. Not everybody has taken orienteering classes in high school and college and knows how to read topo lines and navigate to rivers and stuff like that. And then the other reason that it's important for the average person, is a good map can save you time, and it can be more effective. So I gave an example of the map that we made for the New York State Department of Environmental Conservation. That map saved them a lot of time, and it made their decision-making very effective. We also think accessibility is important to support other people. So these are examples like the Land Trust that owns a preserve, and they want to increase engagement, or public parks like Dewey Recreational Center in Saranac Lake. I'll show a map that we made for them. They want to support public activities, and they need a good map to make people feel comfortable and not get lost while they're enjoying that land. And then the next thing I want to just mention is that it aids in communication. So think about the lake associations. They need good maps to show other lake association members where invasive species are and why they should care about it. And then lastly, public funding. It's becoming more of a requirement. I looked up a couple of interesting statistics that I think you'll enjoy. A lot of people will come up to me and they'll say things like, young people don't know how to use maps. Everybody, they just use their smartphones. They don't need maps. And it's really interesting. If you ask young people, 70% of people will rate their own map reading skills as good. And as far as navigational tools, 83% of 18 to 24-year-olds rely on smartphone apps for outdoor navigation. And this doesn't mean that they're not using maps. They're using a different type of map. They're using maps that are more similar to the one that you see in the bottom right of the screen. They're using things like highways, land cover, water, points of interest to navigate and know where they are. And they love using phones because on a phone, you can see where you are on the map to locate yourself, and you can do things like, you know, a lot of the maps have 3D rendering, so you can kind of look at a landscape in 3D and get a sense of how steep a trail is or how steep a hillside is based on the 3D rendering. And the last thing I want to say was under the statistics category is that people want information on difficulty when planning their routes. So they want good information and they want to use the maps in a way that help them understand what they're getting into. So I'll stop right here and just kind of revisit our agenda. I know I didn't go over the agenda with you at first, but I'll show it right here. We've covered point number 1, so who we make maps for and why it's important. Some of the things that I want to get into for the rest of the presentation is I want to go over some of the accessible design elements that we've built into a lot of our maps. So the next several slides will just be kind of showing off different maps that we've made. And towards the end of the presentation, I want to explain some innovation that we're looking forward to. And the image, the screenshot that you see on the bottom left is a screenshot of our new online Maps for Land Trust platform. So we're doing a whole digital internet web-based mapping platform specifically for land trust.
I wanted to ask a question just as you get into this next section of your presentation. I know the term GIS comes up a lot when we talk about maps these days, and for people who might only have heard of the term or just have some basic knowledge that it has something to do with maps, can you give us kind of a working definition of what we're talking about when we're talking about GIS?
So you're really putting me on the spot here. GIS stands for Geographic Information Systems, and it's basically the data behind maps. I can try to explain it with a map in the top right. That's a map of Long Lake. It's showing our beds that we recorded ourselves by driving a motorboat around the lake. So you see the pink and darker pink patches. I don't know if you can see my pointer 7 and 9 right here. So we use GIS software to take the data behind that to show the shape of that bed and the density of the plants that we recorded in the database. We also use GIS to organize the data of our boat path. So do you see the dark blue dashed line around the map? That's the actual path that our boat took on the lake. So the GIS is the software and data behind it. We take that data and we put it into graphic design software and make it look pretty. So we, make it dashed, we make it blue, we make the water blue, we make the invasive plants beds red. So GIS is the data, and then the graphic design software makes it look pretty. And here's some more maps of Long Lake. This next section are examples of kind of explaining what we can do to improve accessibility with maps and how we do it. And what we can do as map makers is we can build accessibility into all of the maps we do, whether it is for research with Adirondack Research, or recreation maps like our folded waterproof green goat maps, or our kiosk displays. The examples here are 3 different maps of Long Lake. The one on the right is the one that we did in 2022. And the one on the left, I forget the date of this. It might be the 90s, mid-90s that map was made. You can see there have been a lot of advancements in map making. I mean, that's just a poor map on the left, but you can see that's what the Lake Association was using to document where their invasive species are. The middle map was done by Paul Smith College in 2016, and that is a pretty good map showing where the plant beds are. We took it one step further and made it more accessible by showing the water depths in different colored blues, showing the boat paths, and showing the roads. Just putting the roads on there make it so that the lake association members that live around the lake, they know what road they're on, they know where their house is based on the roads, and that can help them really understand the lake better and where the invasive plant beds are. So it makes it more accessible. This is a map that we did for the town of Jay. So the township of Jay comprises the three, I think they're hamlets, Upper Jay, Jay, and Osable Forks. And we were commissioned by the Regional Office of Sustainable Tourism to make a wayfinding map of the town. And they also wanted to show the businesses. And there were some challenges with this. First of all, the township and the three hamlets are spread out pretty far from one another. And all of the businesses are clustered in very small areas on the map. So it makes it hard to show such a big area and show a lot of detail. And the other issue with this is businesses change. So they don't want to label all the businesses on the map. So we came up with this idea to do insets of each town. And I'll show you an example of that. And then we labeled all of the businesses with a colored star without the name. And then we have a coordinate system for identifying where those businesses are. And we categorize them by services, shopping and culture, parks and trails. So accessibility isn't all about just the visuals. It's also about how you organize data on a map. And this was a really complex kiosk display with a complex map with a lot of challenges, but we were able to do these different tricks to make it come out.
Does this make it also easier to update as businesses come and go?
Yeah, so the whole right side of this is a separate panel. So we can just take that out and reprint a smaller panel and put it back. This is a kiosk display that we did for Adirondack Land Trust. This is in Wilmington. It's a preserve called Three Sisters Preserve. And one thing that was neat about this is the client really wanted to make it welcoming. So you can see the title, Welcome All. It's not a title that just says the name of the preserve. And all of the text on here is designed to educate the user on how they can use the trails. It's designed to make them feel more comfortable using it. And it's just a very inclusive experience reading through the information that's on here. And then, of course, the map is easy to read and gives you good information on what the trails are used for and how difficult and long they are. And it's not just about the maps and the data that we represent. Through Green Goat Maps, we have a social media channel, and we're able to share information that help people learn about how to, navigate better or feel more comfortable out in the woods and on trails. So even things like talking about COVID safety, that helps people understand, okay, what do I need to be aware of? What's the etiquette during COVID for getting out and hiking and coming across other people in the outdoor environment? So we give them information like that. So that's something that is really enjoyable for Green Goat Maps, is to share information on our social media channels.
Can I jump in before you get to this section? I think the question that comes to mind before we learn about the accessible design elements that you include, I'm curious how maps in the past have come up short in terms of these kinds of elements.
I mean, lots of ways. Color blindness is probably the one that you notice the most. And it's really hard to get. You can't simply just take a map and put it into a color blindness testing software program to see. There's a lot of details and things that you can change to make maps better. That's kind of a hard question to answer because there's just so much stuff that you see over and over again, even with modern maps. But yeah, I'll go through some examples, and I'll, mainly I just want to show everybody some pretty maps, but I'll try to explain a couple of things in each map that are accessibility features. This map is of Dewey Mountain Recreation Center, of course, in Saranac Lake, and I have a zoom up to show you some details of this. But first, the clients, one of their biggest requests was to help in a positive way explain how you use a trail, where you can snowshoe, where you can skate ski, and where you can classic ski. So in addition to writing about it and creating a map and having on-trail signage, we have an illustration. So we do a lot of illustrations on our maps that explain what to do and how to use the recreational resource. This map, if you see the zoom in, we did a couple things on here that were interesting. I don't know if you can see my pointer, but this yellow trail are snowshoe trails, and they look like snowshoe trails. They look like minor trails. These bigger trails are cross-country ski trails, and they have a border on them, and the border shows how wide the swath is. It's kind of like roads around Dewey. They're all snow covered in the winter, but they're wide and open. And then there are some like this easier way here where it's a little thinner cut through. So we're able to show that information on the map. And then we show color coding for green, blue, and black for difficulty rating. And then these are all different loops. So the loops are designated on the trail with those different chevrons. And lots of other stuff going on in this map, but it's one of my favorites. This is a map that we did for the U.S. Forest Service at their Forest Service headquarters in Vermont, and it's also the junction of these three trails. So it's a North Country Trail, the Long Trail, which goes north to south through Vermont, and then the Appalachian Trail, which shares part of the Long Trail and then veers off towards Maine. So this was an interesting map, and it was for the U.S. Forest Service, so they required that we followed national accessibility standards. This is an interesting map. We were approached by residents of Kawassa Lake, and they were concerned about where people were using wake boats, and they wanted to kind of educate their fellow lake members and come to a consensus to get everybody to agree on how to use wake surfing boats and where to use them. And the client was able to find some information in Vermont of how they decide where to put wake zones. And in Vermont, they figured it out. They want it to be at least 500 feet from shore on all sides. They want it to be in deep water, so water that's at least 20 feet deep, so you're not disturbing the sediment. And they want the wake zone to be at least 200 feet wide, so you don't want it just a narrow swath in the middle of the lake. So we took that data and we mapped it out, and this is a map, and it just does a really good job of explaining that on the northeast part of the lake, it's an appropriate place for wake surfing, but in the southern part of the lake, it's just too small. It doesn't meet those criteria. So it's a really effective way to make a friendly map and show it to people and say, hey, here's the better place for wake surfing.
Dumb basic question for you. What does bathymetry mean?
Bathymetry is the water depth. So it's like topography, but in the water.
Oh. Here's
a map that we did of Pendragon Theater. Well, it's not really a map of the theater, but it's a map of downtown Saranac Lake. And the theater, their theater goers really are concerned with where they're going to park. It's something that they ask them all the time. So we put together this map of where the parking was in Saranac Lake, and we color coded it. We included numbers that represent the number of spots, whether it's on-street parking or in parking lots, and then we color coded it based on 30 minutes, 2 hour, or overnight. And these maps, I just wanted to overload you all with a bunch of pretty maps. This was an interesting project for the Hudson River Watershed Alliance. And we did a series of probably 50 different maps for them of 2 different areas. All the maps were different, lots of ecological data, built environment data, lots and lots of stuff. It was very tricky to make all of these maps look really good and be easily readable by the general public. And for the remaining slides, I'm going to just go through some kiosks and maps that I like that I wanted to share. This is a kiosk panel that we developed for the town of Franklin. So this is Vermontville, just north of Saranac Lake. And they have a ton of recreational assets and a ton of great information to share, but they didn't have it they didn't have a place to show it off. So we designed this, and they built a kiosk at their town hall, and it just has a ton of information for things that you can do in the town of Franklin. So it was really enjoyable to take kind of a town with not a lot of known recreational resources and show everybody what you can do in that town. Oh, and this is, I haven't talked a lot about what we do at Adirondack Research and how maps play a big role, but we do a ton of mapping for lakes and mapping out where their native and invasive plant beds are. And these data get confusing, and it's really hard to engage lake association members. So we do things like make infographics that explain what we're doing. This shows how we throw a rake into the water and you pull it up and measure the plants and identify them. And that's how we get the map on the right, is using the data that we collect with the rake. So incorporating illustrations into their cartography really helps allow people to understand the map. Oh, and we don't always do we don't always do maps. We do other things too. So this complemented a series of maps for the Essex Quarry Nature Preserve in Essex. And we have this right by the pond there, and we explain, the types of frogs that you're likely to see there, and the types of dragonflies and damselflies that you'll see there. So we really enjoy doing some of the ecological interpretive displays too. And lastly, I want to kind of talk about where we're going in the future. We're always trying to be innovative, and we know that a lot of people use online maps, and we want to help support people. We want to make online maps that are accessible for people. There are existing maps out there, like All Trails and Trail Forks, but they're specific to mountain bikers, or they're, just not quite easy to use. So we've recently developed a platform that we call Online Maps for Land Trust, and I kind of want to show it to you. Mitch, can I kind of stop the screen share and then?
Yeah, I think you just push the stop screen share button and then reshare.
All right, let's do it. There we go. So this is an online mapping platform that just gets embedded into a land trust website. And we made it, it's completely interactive. You can hover over the trail and see the name of it, and then you click on it and it gives you information about the trail. And how we've been talking a lot about accessibility. Online mapping, there's not a lot of accessibility built into it. So we tried to do as much as we could to build accessibility into this. So for the trails, we provide information, and this is all GIS information. So this is in our database, and we're not just showing trails by easy, medium, and hard and color coding them. We're color coding them based on their usage. So this is a hiking trail, and then we're giving information about the trail. So the maximum grade, 31%, the distance of the trail. This trail is 2.17 miles long, and the surface is packed dirt. And we've got information. These are being designed for the land trust community, and a lot of people don't really understand what an easement is, or what fee-owned lands are, or what it means to be a state transfer. So we provide that information for people, so that that makes it more accessible. It makes people understand why it's a publicly accessible property, why they're allowed on there. They understand a little bit about who has made that land available to them, and it's just a great thing. And we've also built in a fundraising platform so land trusts can actually raise money, and it's completely interactive. So this is from one of our clients at Lake George Land Conservancy, and you can explore all of their properties really easily, and then find all the information about the different trails. And we've found that a lot of people, not everybody likes this type of topo map, so we have satellite imagery, and we do things like make it so that you can do a 3D rendering. So you can, a lot of people, they want to see what it looks like in 3D to understand if you want to hike up to this lookout, you have to go on this long trail, and you can click on it. That trail is 8.5% grade. It's 1.55 miles long. And you can look at it and zoom around and kind of get an idea. You can tell that up here it's going to get pretty steep. So, we're just trying to incorporate stuff into this that make it more accessible for people. And that's been a lot of fun to work on.
I don't
So
know if you noticed, but my jaw literally dropped at seeing you do that 3D rendering. That is really cool.
thanks. So I'll do share and then I'll go back to presentation. I have to make sure I do the correct one. I think it's this one. And so that's it. So I hope I was able to kind of give you all a glimpse of what maps are and what we are trying to do with them, how we use them. Hopefully, you know, maybe you've seen some of these, you've seen around, you just didn't know that we are the ones that made them. And yeah, so happy to answer any questions that you have.
We have lots of questions that have come in already. I want to ask a really basic question that maybe you can give us some perspective on. Why are you called Green Goat Maps?
I love that question. We're an environmental mapping company. That's why it's green. I mean, that's the simplest answer. And I also wanted to have an animal and a color because it's an easy way to have people remember. And green goat rolls off the tongue. People remember it. Goats are animals that you see hiking and doing things outdoors all over the world. So yeah.
Works on a number of levels. Tell us along those lines, though, tell us about your team. Who comes together to make Green Goat Maps? Because it is not just you.
No. And I don't have a cartography background. My background is as a scientist, and I developed an interest for presenting data, and I got really good at Adobe Illustrator, and I basically just built a map brand. So we have two cartographers, a graphic designer, we have a GIS specialist, or two GIS specialists that just do the data behind the maps, and then we have a field research team. So in the summer we've got 4 to 6 seasonal field technicians, and then our invasive species program coordinator.
Well, and do you see yourself or your company as a disruptor in the industry, or maybe in a more positive way, someone or a group of people who are driving broader change?
I don't think so. But I think we have a niche, and we're providing a service that is not offered by other people. So specifically in making things accessible and working with, you know, public parks and land trusts and those types of people.
I mean, it seems like in an ideal world, you know, you wouldn't be in a niche. Everybody would be doing this.
Yeah, I mean, there's a big need for it for sure. There are a lot of public spaces, a lot of land trusts are no longer just preserving land as open space. They're preserving it and creating trails, and they want to make those trails accessible because that's where there's value. That's what people want. They want to have places to go and enjoy the outdoor environment.
Liz Bellier, in her introduction, talked about the significance of maps being part of the archive that exists at the Adirondack experience. When you're making a map, do you also think of it in terms of being a historical snapshot of that place that you're charting?
Yeah, so there's one example that I think of a lot with that. We did a snowmobile map for Tupper Lake, and I could see people looking at that in 200 years and saying like, "Wow, they rode snowmobiles around here on this route. That's crazy." Um, so,
Must have been the Ice Age.
yeah.
So I want to get to some of the questions that people have asked because some of these are really kind of, in fact, they're all thought-provoking. We had a question from Anthony, who actually has a series of questions. And again, if people have additional questions, just drop them into the Q&A. But he says that you mentioned that much of what you do, or at least some of the work that you do, has been funded by federal dollars. With the current national political climate, are you concerned about the elimination of that kind of funding or reductions because these maps have been providing information that isn't necessarily valued to the same degree?
Oh yeah, of course, and it's not just federal dollars. You know, there's a lot of state money that's going to be affected too. So yeah, it's definitely something that we think about. You know, but I'm not that worried. The private sector needs maps too. You know, land trusts and public, municipally owned parks, they need maps. Businesses need maps. Mapping is something that is used by everybody across society and across different businesses.
Um, a couple of people have asked questions sort of along these terms, and maybe it's just the to have you describe the literal work of making these maps look good. Steve Perry, for example, asks, "What platform are you using for your land trust interactive map?" But I guess that like the bigger question is like, how do you like literally go from a blank canvas to something that has stuff on it?
Mhm. Yeah. I can explain it with the paper and kiosk maps a little bit easier. We use Adobe products. So we use Adobe Illustrator, Adobe InDesign for the GIS part of it. We use ArcGIS Pro. We use fancy plugins. There's one called the Venza Map Publisher that we use a lot. And then we use a lot of other design software. We even use Canva to put our maps into social squares for sharing on social media. For the online mapping stuff, we use the Esri platform, ArcGIS Online, and then we also do a ton of custom coding. So the map that I showed you, that interactive map that I showed you, we're programming that using Python, Next.js, React, really fancy web and online stuff.
And how about when you're collecting the data? There's a question about whether you use things like LiDAR and photo telemetry, and also will AI play a role in map creation if it's not already being used?
Yeah, so we there's a ton of data that's out there that's public, and there are really good AI tools that are helping to gather data and present it and do things with it. Processing data is a big deal. We also use a lot of platforms that use AI and other technologies. So when we're making a map of an area and you're trying to ground truth it, you can go out there with a GPS unit. Or one thing that we do a lot just to check things is we look at Strava. Strava is the app that you go running with and you log your runs. Well, when you sign up for that, you give them permission to use all their data, and you can access that data and you can see heat maps of where people are going, and we can use that to essentially ground truth trails.
So people don't realize it, but that they're out there running or just hiking trails, and they're actually helping people like you go about the business of designing the next maps.
Yep, it's really useful.
Ah. A couple of questions. Well, one is a sort of a shout out, and the other is a question from Christina Bell. She starts by saying, "Not a question, but I went to Siena with Justin, the invasive guy."
Mhm.
And then she asks, "Do you reach out to the preserves and land trusts, or do they come to your business by themselves?"
Oh, both. We have to advertise. We have to reach out to people, build relationships, and yeah, for sure.
And I'm sure anybody who was on this call who might have a need to design maps should look you up. Um, Donna wants to know, are all the trails marked that you have made the maps for? And also, are there classes that someone can take to learn how to better read maps?
hmm hmm So I went to school for something entirely different, but my freshman year of college, I had to take a physical education credit, and the class I chose to take was orienteering. So that's how I learned about maps and fell in love with them. I forget your question. What were you
Well, the other part of the question was, are all the trails marked that you've made the
asking?
maps for?
Mhm. No, and that's a lot of what we do with the clients is we not only talk about the maps that they need, but we talk about their on trail signage and arrows and junction markers and stuff like that. And it's really, I've learned a lot from making maps to just looking at different preserves and trail networks and seeing how they do it. It's really interesting.
What are the biggest challenges you run into in doing this work, or your team runs into in doing this work?
Um, I don't I don't know. I mean, there's a lot of logistical challenges. You're getting a map done and then you realize you don't know where the trail is and you have to ask somebody to go out and take a GPS and find it and do stuff like that. Um, I think those are the biggest challenges.
Chip wants to know, and I'll confess I'm not sure what he's referring to, but I bet you'll know. Do you spend time on 508 compliance for your online maps?
Oh man, I feel like I'm going to get in trouble if I answer that question. I'm going to pass on that one.
All right. I'm not sure I know what 508 compliance is, and but maybe you can answer offline. Um, Another question, do you have a map app, or is this something that might be developed down the road that would allow a user to tailor a map that they want for use by selecting a pre-established table of features, a real-time boutique map? And it looks a little like the what you were showing us. People can choose from a variety of features, right?
Yeah, I mean, there's a ton of stuff out there, and we're just a small business. We're doing a set number of things, but there are so many cool things out there. I was just talking to a business owner a couple of weeks ago who does line painting on highways, and his company has developed an app that helps the painting trucks know where they are and what they've painted, and that's a map, and it's an app that company developed. I mean, that's just one little example of what you can use mapping in industry for.
Yeah. Valerie wants to know, what is one place you would like to map and why?
Oh man, I don't know. I guess I'd like to, when I think of going on vacation, I'll look and see maps, but then I also want to make a map of it. There's something about really understanding a place by making a map of it that's really special. And one neat thing that I found is like when our group makes a map, I'm not doing the map, but I'm looking at it, and it always hits a point where you see it and you're like, oh man, this looks like a great map. I really want to explore there. I want to check that out. And when a map does that to you, you know it's a good map.
I have to say that those moments happened throughout your presentation. There were so many places that I was exposed to through what you were showing me that the map really made me want to explore them in a way that if I had just, seen a name on a list of trails or a description even, it wouldn't have done it.
Well, when it warms up, you can go check out the
Okay.
wilds. Go walk around all those trails.
Yeah, absolutely. Another question, do you have the ability to receive feedback from your map users to update, correct, add information, like sort of like iNaturalist sort of apps?
Yeah, so we have mistakes on our maps, and we love to hear about them. We don't get as much feedback as we would like. Um, so on our website, we have a link at the bottom, which is a feedback form, and you click on it, and it's a simple Google document, and you type in the map and what you found wrong on it, and then we keep that information. And when we do a reprint of a map, we know how to update it.
Another question that I'm not familiar with this term, but maybe you are. Michael would like to know, are you connected or affiliated with OnX Maps?
No, but we use it a lot. That's a great platform. We use it for our invasive species work a lot to know where landowners are, to get information. Yeah, that's a great one.
No. We have an anonymous attendee who asks, can you create a map listing all of the survey markers established by Verplank Colvin? And this person goes on to say his family will pay for it, LOL.
That would be a cool map. I did have somebody ask me if I had a Bigfoot map, and I had to say no.
Can
That's
you
actually a really good idea.
can you imagine pie in the sky kinds of things that might be coming to the kinds of maps that you do, say 5 years or 10 years down the road?
I think virtual reality is going to play a big role. When you're out on a map on a trail, and you could scan a QR code, and it could bring up a map and show it to you, and then you could point your phone and see things, based on that, where an old well was, or an old structure or foundation or something like that. So those can be very geographically oriented, and that's a type of map.
Can you put into words the light bulb that went off when you were in that orienteering class that made you fall for maps?
I think it was learning how to not get lost by, you know, instead of going in the direction you want to go, maybe go towards the road, and then you hit the road and turn right at the road, and then you kind of know where you are. So I've always been fascinated with how easy it is to get lost in the woods and how useful a good map can be.
Mm.
And I've just used so many maps where I'm pretty good with maps, but I get lost when it's a bad map and the intersection's not right, or they don't label the trail correctly. And so I think kind of that was a light bulb moment, just kind of understanding something so basic in navigation, and then thinking about all the other tools that can be available to you with a good map.
Well, and I'll confess that that's always been one of my frustrations with things like Google Maps or Waze or any number of the more or less standard online platforms, is when there is information that's wrong, and the or sort of the ever evolving nature of those maps, and whether you necessarily can trust them in a way that you might be able to trust something that's sort of a static map that someone has declared this is what this area looks like.
Yeah, I mean, it's all up to interpretation, whether it's a paper map or a online map, and there's a lot of cultural differences. I watched a presentation a couple years ago about, I think it was Google Maps, and in Japan, the same mapping platform shows things differently. So in Japan, when they have an overpass or a road going over another road, they really like to show the detail, showing that it's going over it. Whereas in the US, when you look at Google Maps, it doesn't show the shadowing of an overpass. It just shows the kind of roads coming together in a certain way.
Well, and
So,
I was wondering about things like that, things like cultural sensibilities when you're designing maps.
yep, yep, there's differences for sure.
Yeah. Well, I'm not seeing any more questions at this point, and we're just about at the end of our hour. So I think you've answered every possible question about the work that you do. But it was really a truly fascinating hour. And Ezra Schwartzberg, thank you so much. Appreciate everything you've had to say and the work that you do. And I'm going to turn things back over to Liz Bellier.
Thanks.
Great, thank you. And thank you, Mitch and Ezra. Always such a pleasure to have these conversations as part of this series. And thank you for all of you at home for joining us tonight. We hope you'll be back next month on Monday, April 7th for another fascinating program featuring John Sasso and his book, History and Legends of the Northern Adirondacks, Volume 1. To learn more about the event and register for next month's, you can visit theadkx.org/events. And while the museum is closed to the public just for a couple more months, you can stay connected with us via our social media and our website, theadkx.org. And if you'd like to revisit tonight's discussion or share it with a friend, we will make a recording available on our website and YouTube channel. And so on behalf of all of us at the Adirondack Experience, thank you for spending your evening with us, and we will see you next month. Take care, everyone.